By the time modern diets took over, 15 native vegetables had already disappeared from the land that raised them. Their seeds sat buried, silent, waiting through centuries of droughts. But today, tribal farmers and scientists are planting them again, and it could rewrite our food future. What made them vanish in the first place?
Number 15. Blue camas. The story of blue camas starts in the meadows of the Pacific Northwest, where every spring the land turned violet blue. The sight was breathtaking, but it was more than beauty. It was food security for thousands of years. Tribes like the Nlaka'pamux, Coast Salish, and Nez Perce roasted camas bulbs underground for 2 days until they turned dark and sweet like caramelized sugar. Archaeologists found camas ovens in British Columbia that date back more than 4,000 years. Those ovens could fit enough bulbs to feed an entire village feast. But there was one rule: dig the right bulb. The deadly death camas grew right beside it, and one wrong pull could turn a celebration into tragedy. Skilled harvesters passed this knowledge through stories, teaching the next generation when to dig, where to dig, and which flower bends to the west. When settlers arrived in the 1800s, they saw only swampy land and plowed the meadows flat for cattle. Within a few decades, the purple fields faded. Yet some families quietly saved seeds, planting them behind homes and schools. Today, camas is making a comeback in native food sovereignty projects, a gentle sign that memory can root itself again. Therefore, let's follow that trail south to another humble root that once kept entire nations alive through winters. Number 14. Yampa high in the Rockies, above 6,000 feet, grows a wild root that travelers once trusted more than their maps. Yampa, the mountain carrot, became survival food for both native hunters and early explorers. It looks like a delicate wildflower, but underground it hides crisp, white roots, rich in carbohydrates and vitamins. The Ute, Shoshone, and Paiute people roasted or ate it raw during long hunting trips. Lewis and Clark wrote about finding it in 1805 when they were starving in the Bitterroot Mountains. They called it a root of remarkable sweetness. One root could keep a traveler strong for days. During harsh winters, families stored bundles of dried yampa, its flavor still nutty after months. Scientists later found it contains natural compounds that help regulate blood sugar, perfect for steady energy. However, when settlers brought livestock, grazing wiped out much of its habitat. The roots grew smaller each decade, yet hikers in Idaho and Montana still stumble upon it, sometimes unaware they're walking over one of the continent's oldest foods. The question now is, could this lost mountain carrot grow again in modern fields built for profit? The answer hides in the next plant, one that took root in nearly every prairie. Number 13. Jerusalem artichoke. Before potatoes ruled American farms, a native sunflower fed entire plains communities. The Jerusalem artichoke, with golden blooms and knobby tubers, grew wild from Canada to Texas. Early tribes roasted it for its nutty flavor, and in 1605, Samuel de Champlain carried it back to France, calling it a miracle root. The name confused everyone. It's not from Jerusalem, and it's no artichoke. It's a Helianthus tuberosus, cousin to the common sunflower. 1 acre could produce nearly 25,000 pounds of tubers without irrigation, a farmer's dream before tractors and fertilizers. In the 1700s, French peasants survived cold winters on these roots, while North American tribes used them in stews and journey cakes. The secret lay in its inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds good gut bacteria and keeps blood sugar stable. However, by the 20th century, people mocked it as poor man's food. Industrial farms turned to corn and white potatoes, leaving this golden crop behind. But recently, chefs and scientists rediscovered it as a climate-resilient food. So maybe the joke's on us. The humble tuber outlasted empires, and its flowers still track the sun. And that sun leads us next to a vine that crept quietly through the rivers of the East. Number 12. Groundnut. Before the potato ever crossed the Atlantic, North America already had its own supertuber, the groundnut. Native to riverbanks from Maine to Georgia, it grew in long, bead-like chains underground, storing rich protein and flavor. The Wampanoag taught the Pilgrims how to roast and mash it in 1621. That lesson likely kept the settlers alive through their first brutal winter. Groundnut tubers contain 3 times more protein than potatoes, and their vines fix nitrogen, enriching the soil instead of draining it. In the 1800s, Henry David Thoreau even wrote about digging them near Walden Pond, calling them a bread of the wilderness. Yet, as railroads and imported crops spread, the groundnut vanished from farm fields. Its slow-growing habit didn't fit the new demand for speed and uniformity. Today, researchers at the University of Maine are studying how to re-domesticate it for future food systems. Some chefs already serve it again, roasted, buttery, and rich like chestnut potatoes. So the story turns full circle. A crop that once saved lives might do it again in a warming world. And from those riverbanks, another small plant began seasoning history, one that changed how the continent tasted forever. Number 11. Nodding onion. Before grocery aisles had spice shelves, the nodding onion gave flavor to the open plains. Its pale pink blossoms bent like little lanterns in the wind, humble but powerful. Every tribe knew it. The Dakota dried the bulbs for winter stews, while the Cherokee carried braids of them on long journeys. European traders loved it too. In the early 1700s, explorers crossing the Mississippi wrote about onions that perfumed the prairie for miles. It grew anywhere, on cliffs, forest edges, even cracks in dry rock. And it didn't just feed people. Its sulfur oils kept insects away, turning fields into natural repellents centuries before pesticides. Settlers tried to replace it with imported onions, yet the wild ones survived, bending their necks every summer, bowing to no plow. Even now, hikers across the Midwest stumble upon their scent after rain. For a seasoning plant, it held surprising influence. Without it, stew would taste flat, and medicine would lose its sting. Therefore, as flavor faded from the wild, another plant was already fighting to prove greens could be more than garnish. It had the strength to outlast cities and centuries alike. Number 10. Lamb's quarters farmers curse it today, but ancient farmers treated lamb's quarters like gold. This leafy green grew in river valleys long before quinoa found fame. Archaeologists uncovered its seeds in Kentucky caves, 3,500 years old, stored in woven baskets beside corn. It once stood beside maize in the lost gardens of the East. Its leaves carried more calcium than milk and more iron than spinach. The Mandan and Hidatsa tribes ate it fresh, boiled, or dried for soups. When colonists arrived, they rebranded it as a pest, unaware it was feeding their livestock with more nutrition than wheat straw. Scientists now say its cousin, quinoa, evolved from it. But this North American version thrived without irrigation, chemical fertilizers, or global shipping. Some researchers argue if lamb's quarters had been commercialized, it might have replaced lettuce worldwide. However, progress prefers control. Crops that grow freely rarely make rich men richer. So fields were sprayed, seeds forgotten, and the wild green vanished from the menu. Yet, while farmers erased it from rows, another crop waited quietly on the water, one that never needed soil to thrive, carrying both sacred story and survival. Number 9. Wild rice. Across northern lakes, long canoes still glide through tall green stalks. Wild rice, or manumin, the good berry in Ojibwe, grows not in fields, but in water. Every grain carries history. For centuries, the Ojibwe and Menominee nations harvested it by knocking ripe kernels gently into canoes, leaving enough for next season's growth. In 1820, explorers called it the best grain in the world. Its protein rivals oats, and it contains twice the fiber. But what mattered most was meaning. It fed body and spirit together. Then came industry. By 1950, Minnesota companies tried to patent it, forcing it into patties and calling it cultivated wild rice. Native harvesters fought back, saying no corporation could own a sacred lake. The struggle lasted decades, part protest, part prayer. Today, true wild rice still grows in only a few hundred lakes, guarded fiercely by local tribes. Each harvest feels like a heartbeat between past and present. Therefore, as water carried seeds of resilience, land was preparing another miracle, a fruit that tasted tropical, yet grew in cold American forests where no mango could dream to live. Number 8. Pawpaw. Long before bananas arrived, the pawpaw ruled river valleys. It smells like mango and tastes like custard, but grows in places that freeze each winter. Native families once wrapped it in leaves to ripen slowly, turning it into natural dessert. George Washington even chilled pawpaws in snow and served them to guests at Mount Vernon. Thomas Jefferson sent seeds to Europe in 1786, calling it a fruit of the New World. Yet it disappeared from markets after railroads favored apples and imported sugar fruits. The pawpaw ripens fast, too soft to ship, too wild to standardize. By 1900, few outside Appalachia remembered its name. Botanists rediscovered it decades later and found it packed with magnesium, potassium, and antioxidants. Even NASA tested its compounds for cancer research in the 1990s. But the real magic lies in its story, a tropical fruit that refused to leave home. Now, small farmers from Ohio to Tennessee are reviving it. Pawpaw festivals draw thousands each fall, celebrating a flavor once forgotten. And as sweet as it tastes, its comeback hints at a deeper truth. Sometimes, the cure for the modern diet grows where deserts begin, in trees that once sweetened survival itself. Number 7. Chokecherry. Before sugar, before coffee, before canned food, there was chokecherry. Its deep red berries powered life on the move. Plains tribes crushed them with dried meat and fat to make pemmican, an energy bar that could last through winter hunts or long migrations. A single handful could fuel a warrior for a day. By the 1800s, explorers in the Dakotas wrote that every family keeps chokecherry cakes for travel. The fruit's tart bite came with purpose, full of vitamin C and antioxidants that kept scurvy away. However, it also carried danger. The seeds hold cyanide compounds, and only precise preparation kept it safe. That skill came from generations of practice, passed through stories beside campfires. When settlers arrived, they tried to tame it into jam. But for tribes, it was never just food. It was strength in storage, a medicine of endurance. Today, tribal foragers are bringing it back, teaching new generations how to balance flavor with respect. So the same fruit that once kept riders alive now rides again through kitchens and classrooms. And just beyond those hills, another sweet survivor waited. A desert seed that grew sugar where rain forgot to fall. Number 6. Mesquite pod. In the hottest deserts of Arizona and Texas, a tree once gave sweetness without water. Mesquite trees drop long golden pods that taste faintly of honey. Ground into flour, those pods became bread, drink, and dessert for thousands of years. The Pima and Seri tribes roasted them, while Spanish missionaries marveled that such sweetness came from sand. Mesquite flour carries natural sugar, fiber, and 30% protein, more than wheat. Archaeologists found grinding stones coated with mesquite residue dating back 6,000 years. However, ranching changed everything. Cattle trampled seedlings, and farmers called the trees weeds. In the 1900s, government campaigns spent millions trying to kill mesquite, yet its roots ran deep, over 150 feet underground in some cases. When drought came, it bloomed again. Now, scientists call it the sugar tree of the future. Its flower has a low glycemic index and grows without irrigation. Small bakeries in Tucson and Phoenix even bake mesquite cookies for diabetic diets. It seems every time humans tried to erase it, it returned sweeter. But in the next story, sweetness came in different shapes, some carved into history, others traded like treasure, born from seeds that carried both beauty and survival. Number 5. Squash gourds. Every native garden once had 3 silent sisters: corn, beans, and squash. Squash was the quiet one, yet it held the family together. Thick vines shaded soil, roots locked in moisture, and the flesh carried vitamins that kept whole villages healthy through harsh winters. Archaeologists in Mexico found squash seeds over 10,000 years old, making it one of the first crops ever grown on this continent. By 1000 BCE, varieties spread everywhere, from the Hopi blue squash in the southwest to the Cherokee candy roaster in the Appalachians. Tribes roasted them whole, dried them for flour, and traded seeds across nations. Even the shells had purpose. Dried gourds became storage bowls and musical rattles. However, when canned goods and store crops arrived, many of these heirlooms disappeared. Today, farmers' markets in Arizona and North Carolina are replanting those lost lines. The colors, green, orange, gray, feel like stories retold through soil. Each seed carries its region's voice, whispering through centuries of survival. So the gourd that once kept balance between crops still does. But as forests fed families, trees too had their secrets. One tree held a hidden milk, rich as cream, and nearly forgotten by modern kitchens. Number 4. Hickory nut. Before refrigeration, before butter churns, the forest gave its own cream. Hickory nuts, pounded with water, turned into a thick milk so rich that native cooks called it tree cream. It flavored soups, breads, and sauces long before cows filled pastures. The Lenape, Shawnee, and Cherokee gathered nuts each fall, cracking them with river stones. In 1792, explorer William Bartram described families boiling hickory mash in clay pots until a pure oil rose to the surface, shining like gold. That oil stored through winter, feeding both children and elders. Hickory trees could live over 200 years and withstand storms that felled pines. Therefore, losing one meant losing generations of food. When settlers cleared forests for farmland, hickory disappeared from daily life. Its taste, somewhere between pecan and caramel, faded into memory. However, wild trees still drop nuts across the Midwest and South. Some chefs are now using hickory milk again in recipes, calling it the original plant-based dairy. And from those same forests, another root waited beneath the soil, one linked to the sunflower, forgotten by history, yet powerful enough to feed both people and the planet. Number 3. Sunflower root. Everyone knows the sunflower for its seeds, but few remember its roots once fed villages. Long before sunflower oil filled supermarket shelves, native farmers roasted the roots like parsnips. They grew beside beans and maize, forming an early version of crop rotation that kept soil rich without chemicals. The Mandan people cultivated sunflowers for more than 2,000 years. Their roots and stalks provided food, fuel, and even dye. In 1749, French explorer Pierre Gautier wrote about tribes storing dried sunflower roots for winter. Earthy, sweet, and surprisingly filling. The plant worked double duty: flowers for seeds, roots for survival. However, when the industrial age turned agriculture into business, roots were forgotten. Companies favored fast-growing hybrids that looked prettier but lacked flavor. Therefore, the sunflower became a symbol of beauty, stripped of its usefulness. Now, some farmers in Kansas and Oklahoma are restoring ancient strains. They say the roots regenerate soil and resist pests better than modern hybrids. It's history repeating itself, quietly beneath our feet. And speaking of ancient strength, Another plant held that same stubborn spirit, a grain once banned by empires, reborn in modern labs with a past that still stirs debate among historians. Number 2. Amaranth. Amaranth glows red under the sun, and perhaps that color tells its story. The Aztecs grew it as sacred food, the grain of life. By 1519, they harvested tons each season, feeding armies and cities. It carried more protein than corn and more calcium than milk. Then came the Spanish conquest. The invaders saw its rituals and banned it outright in 1521. Growing amaranth could cost a farmer their life. Fields were burned, seeds destroyed, and yet a few survived, hidden in mountain soil. Centuries later, botanists found wild amaranth thriving in forgotten corners of Mexico. Modern nutritionists call it a super grain, but for the Nahua and Hopi people, it was simply survival. It grows in drought, heat, even poor soil. Therefore, every seed tells a story of endurance. Today, amaranth is rising again, from smoothie bowls to NASA food programs. It needs half the water of wheat and offers double the nutrients. What was once forbidden now feeds astronauts. But before space food and bans, before modern science, there came one seed older than all. A desert bean so tough it thrived in 110 degrees Fahrenheit heat, defying extinction and rewriting survival itself. Number 1. Tepary bean. The desert never gave mercy, yet one seed refused to die. The tepary bean thrived in heat that scorched corn and dried wheat to dust. It grew where rainfall barely reached 5 inches a year, in soils cracked like pottery. Desert farmers of the Southwest called it the seed with memory. Historians trace its cultivation back 5,000 years among the Tohono O'odham and Hopi. These communities learned how to plant it deep, 6 inches below the surface, where the last hint of rain still slept. The bean gave high protein, complex carbs, and a strength that matched the land itself. By the 1900s, modern farming pushed it aside for crops that needed water and fertilizers. Then came the irony. As droughts worsened, scientists rediscovered tepary's genetics. In 2018, climate researchers confirmed it could survive temperatures up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit and restore nitrogen to dry soil. Therefore, the bean that once kept tribes alive may one day keep cities fed. Farmers in Arizona are growing it again, calling it the comeback crop of the century. It tells a story bigger than food, a lesson about endurance and respect. History never truly dies. It waits to be remembered. Click the next video on your screen right now before it disappears. It continues this story and reveals what really happened next.